Virtual RC Racing, the Inside Story. Episode 5, Tires, Physics, and Feel. My name is Peter Barefoots. This is probably the most complex part of the VRC physics, as tires are kind of black magic, and they are round indeed. Ronnie Tunn was right after all. Vehicle dynamics, aerodynamics, and even combustion engines can be described with formulas that have been developed and improved over time. Tire dynamics is a totally different animal, so to say, and there are many ways to go about it. The tire testing data and relating this to car performance data obtained with the data logger are essential to create a good reference point in understanding how foam tires on an asphalt surface behave. But that is only one half of the equation. The other half is creating a tire physics model that creates the RC racing car behavior we are expecting, and which creates a realistic RC car performance. In other words, if an RC car in the hands of a world-class racer like Michael Salvin can do 14-second laps on the Hempstead track, it should of course also do 14-second laps on the virtual Hempstead track. And very importantly, it should feel very similar. But let me first put things in the right perspective. If you think of it, an RC racing sim is the ideal sim setup if you compare it to other simulators like car racing or flying. Real RC racing on a real track and virtual RC racing in a computer sim on a virtual track are practically the same. The only difference is watching the car, in the real world, from the rostrum, and in the sim, watching the track on a computer screen while sitting in a chair at the comfort of your home. And you use the exact same controller in real and virtual RC racing. There is simply no other type of simulation game which is closer to the real thing than virtual RC racing. When we started with VRC early 2000, there weren't widescreen monitors. Now we have 3440 by 1440 or even higher high-resolution and high-response monitors, curved, a meter wide, and extremely powerful graphics cards that easily run the sim over 500 frames per second. So also from that perspective, the RC racing sim experience has moved even closer to the real RC racing experience. The input for a real RC racer and a virtual RC racer are the same. What you see and what you hear, that's it. Nothing else, no force feedback steering and pedals, no racing rig with 3D motion needed to give you a sense of feeling the acceleration, braking and cornering forces to which your brain responds. Just the visual and audible input, seeing and hearing, is what your brain uses to control an RC car, in reality and in the sim. And now we have arrived at that all-realism determining factor, feel. You want your virtual RC car to feel as close as possible to your real RC car, the same steering response and stability, acceleration, and braking, the same feel. And this is exactly what we asked of our physics wizard Todd Wasson, who had never seen, let alone driven, a real RC car. The first chance for Todd to see what RC racing was all about was at the 2002 World's 110 scale 235mm nitro sedans in Cincinnati. This was also the first time we met. Seeing these incredibly fast radio-controlled racing cars was an eye-opener for Todd, far beyond what he had expected. It was an essential step in the process of trying to create that all-important feel. The next step was driving a real RC car himself. The first time Todd came to the Netherlands to discuss RC car physics with Michael Salvin, he had a chance to run Michael's Serpent 960 at the Hempstead track, as that was the very first track we had modeled for VRC. Todd had used that track for all the testing. We had sent our VRC pistol grip controller to Todd, so he could actually drive and test the very first virtual RC cars himself. With that rather limited virtual RC racing experience, he was going to drive one of the ultimate 1/8 scale RC cars on the planet, of the world-renowned and Serpent's RC car developer Michael Salvin himself, on the Hempstead track. Todd did very well, much to our surprise, especially Michael's. Anyway, this real-life RC racing experience was extremely important for Todd to understand what we meant with feel. At a later visit to the Netherlands, Todd got a chance to drive a 110 scale electric touring car on carpet at the LRP Masters race in Eppelheim, Germany. A totally different experience, of course, but very important for Todd to also get a feel of this very different RC racing class, different surface, different handling, different power, different sound. Now back to the tire's physics model or physics engine. Having all the tire testing data was a good reference point to start developing the tire physics model, but not more than that. The tire physics engine must calculate 350 times per second how much longitudinal and lateral traction the tire can produce under a certain load. If the cornering, acceleration, or braking forces exceed what the tire can produce under that tire load, the tire will lose traction and the car will change trajectory or lose braking or acceleration. Now think of this. Tires are hardly ever in a power balanced state, but are almost always in a state of slip during cornering, acceleration, or braking. Watching a slow motion video of a car cornering in reverse direction shows this effect very clearly. I can only hope that this explanation is helpful in understanding the complexity of how tires work, especially in simulation software, and how tires very much determine the feel of an RC racing car. I am certainly not an expert in this field, but I have been there, done it, be it ages ago. But this principle hasn't changed and will never change. Finally, something about the tire physics engine itself. That's the piece of the software that does all the calculations and computations based on the input, the forces generated by the vehicle dynamics, the surface conditions, and what forces the tire can generate under specific circumstances 350 times per second. And these forces are being generated at a very small and continuous changing part of the tire surface that is in contact with the road surface. Many books have been written and theories developed about how to simulate what is happening in that very small contact patch of the tire that is changing all the time. The most common theory is the brush model to simulate this process. The brush model imagines a finite number of elastic brush needles or pins which are in contact with the road surface. The number of pins in contact and their flexibility change constantly depending on the tire load, tire deflection, camber, caster, and slip angles, etc. With so-called multi-body simulation, or MBS, they can then calculate forces. I remember Todd explaining to me how this worked, but to be honest, it was very much beyond me. I remember Todd mentioning Pacheco and his magic formula to calculate these forces. Pacheco's theory and formula are very much the standard in tire physics today. I think that ultimately Todd ended up writing his own formulas and algorithms for the tire physics engine, as foam tires are fundamentally different from rubber tires with flexible side walls, for which this formula was developed. I hope that with this explanation you have a better understanding of the complexity of achieving that all-important feel. When Todd finally produced tires of which he thought had the right feel, we started testing them ourselves. We being Michael Salvin, Rene Cornella, who worked with Michael in Serpent on Pro Engineer, and Julius Kolf, three very experienced and accomplished RC racers with a good understanding of RC car dynamics and setup. They provided the quality feedback to Todd. He would then work on one or more of the 80-plus parameters to bring the tire performance and feel closer to what the team wanted. With these parameters, Todd could fine-tune the tire characteristics, indeed the feel. New versions of the tire were sent over the internet for further testing and evaluation. As you will understand, this was a very important step in the process to create that all-important feel. Again, I owe a lot to Todd and Michael, Rene and Julius for what has been achieved. At that time, around 2003, 2004, communication was not as easy and fast as it is today. When we started developing the final version of VRC, VRC-V4 or VRC-Pro, one of the first things we developed was an internal communication platform to exchange ideas and upload new or updated components and tracks. A massive step forward. I hope that you have a better understanding now of how unique the VRC tire physics model is and how crucial it was for the future success of VRC. But we're not done yet. We have only just begun. And remember, this is only about VRC version 3. There is so much more to reveal about virtual RC V3. But let's leave the physics and switch to graphics and Tony West for now. That story is next. Thanks for watching.